Welcome back. I am delighted to introduce to you a very dear, longtime friend and an inspiration in the field of spiritual eldering, and elder care. As I did yesterday, before I introduce our keynote for today, I want to share with you, in our work of the saging world, we have what we call an elder creed. It's the definition of an elder that was written long ago by Barry and Debbie Barkan and residents of the Live Oak Project. An elder is a person who is still growing, still a learner, still with potential, and whose life continues to have within it promise for and connection to the future. An elder is still in pursuit of happiness, joy, and pleasure, and her or his birthright to these remains intact. Moreover, an elder is a person who deserves respect and honor, and whose work it is to synthesize wisdom from long life experience and to formulate this into a legacy for future generations. Our beloved friend and keynote this morning is Barry Barkan. Barry Barkan fancies himself a folk gerontologist because, as he says, most of what I know about aging, I learned from the folks I work with. In his early 30s, he was sitting under a live oak tree in Berkeley when he was summoned by a voice in his imagination to work to change the role of elder in the culture. The impact of that moment was so powerful that he went on to create the Live Oak Project and has developed regenerative communities in the US and Israel. An academic evaluation of the Israel project said that more than 90% of the participating elders experienced some benefit or great benefit from participating in regenerative communities. And Victor and I can attest to that, as our aunt and uncle live in one of those amazing communities inspired by Barry Barkan. And at one point in our lives, we fantasized about retiring there ourselves. He's a co-founder of the latest ideation of the Live Oak Project, which has as its mission to reimagine, redesign, and transform the whole system of care and services for elders and people living with disabilities from top to bottom and inside out. Reb Zalman Schachter Shalomi called Barry and his wife Deborah his teachers in the saging work. And it's a delight and an honor to have you here with us, Barry.
Thank you, dear Nadia. It's my delight and my privilege to be here today. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a keynote speaker this morning. You know, when we wrote the definition of an elder, it was in 1975 when we conceived of it, and at the time, it was to change the image, the self-identity, the self-image of people living in elder care homes, specifically the home where we launched our first regenerative community. And now 50 years later, I'm seeing how relevant it is in my life, as I'm now looking at the formulation of a legacy for future generations. And this is really, really important to me to be looking at long life experience, but also looking to the future, because it's the future where our greatest teaching for navigating this difficult age we live in lives. And so I would like to start by saying, Amitai, can I raise my finger every time I want to see a new, the next one, please? You see, what happens is that that I'm not particularly great at using the technology, and so I cut my teeth on an old world typewriter, and so thank you, Amitai, for being the chief technological officer for this presentation. So aging, as we know, is a marathon. It's not a sprint. And particularly as we live by ourselves, and I don't like the concept of living alone, but living by ourselves, it becomes even more important that we begin preparing for the marathon of the years we have in front of us. And so we're going to talk about four things. One is how, even when we're living by ourselves, we can reach out and make connections. The second is to shake loose from the tendency that has been ingrained over a lifetime of ageism, of seeing limitations to who we are and who we can become. And the third thing is the practice of becoming our most authentic selves. And finally, it's the ultimate practice for eldering, which is to live in the sweet spot of goodness in every encounter. And the sub-theme for this is the love we take is equal to the love we make. So Amitai, you want to do another one, please? When I first thought of this topic, I began thinking about aging alone. And it occurred to me that this is not a disease. It is not a pathological state. And it is not the same of loneliness, same thing as loneliness. Because loneliness itself it can be very destructive in our lives. And so, there's a lot of scientific evidence these days that says what I think Ray Charles could have seen, which is that loneliness can lead to disease, can lead to a disruption of our life patterns. And so the thing that I want to say most importantly is that addressing the whole idea of living alone, which is that if you can participate in a web-based seminar, you never need to be alone. There are so many ways we can reach out and touch someone, either in Zoom calls with families and old friends, or in finding affinity groups, or in finding causes and movements that we want to engage ourselves in, or in education and learning, or in just watching YouTubes that stimulate our imagination. We never need to be alone as we are living by ourselves. So this is really one of the most important things that I think that we need to understand about this process. At the same time, in varying degrees, most of us have some predisposition to isolate. In fact, it's probably part of the process of life. We're born into our bodies as infants, and it's certainly, we have one primary relationship when we're in the womb, and then we sort of expand our relationships, and then as we grow older, our relationships shrink. We've lost friends, we've lost loved ones. We're aware of our mortality. Our energy level may be less. And so there is some predisposition towards isolation. But let's not see this predisposition as our friend. Let's take an inner journey to shake loose from this tendency to isolate. Imagine that you're in a car and you're being pulled over the side of the road, and the police officer says, please exit the car, put your hands on the roof, and assume the position. So let's assume the position of meditation. Take a few deep breaths in, take a few deep breaths out, in and out, in and out. Let's imagine that we want to get to a place where our minds are unfettered, and that in front of us there's a wall of doubt. And the wall of doubt has within it every stereotype on aging we've ever heard in our lifetimes. We want to get over the wall of doubt, and so we go up to it. And for each of us, it may be different. For some, it may be a brick wall. For some, it may be the abomination that surrounds people park in Berkeley of of what looks like train cars stacked one on top of another. It could be a steel wall. For each of us, it's different, but we're able to get to the top, and as we get to the top, it gets higher. And each time we get closer, it gets higher and higher. So it's clear that we're not going to get over the wall. And so now let's think about getting around it. And as we get to one end, it expands. And every time we reach the end, it expands again and again. So we're not going to get around the wall. And we hear in a voice in our head that says, okay, let's go through it. And we back up and we start to run towards the wall, and we hear the voice in our head, and it says, hold it. If you just run into it, you'll hurt yourself. Just walk up to it and touch it gently. And we walk up to the wall of doubt, and we touch it gently, and it opens up before us. And on the other side is the most creative environment we've ever been in our lives. We all know is our special place, our special place. And we're entering our special place, be it the seaside or a mountaintop or wherever. Could be our backyard, could be our living room. And in that place, we see our lives as permeated we see our lives as permeated by all kinds of sounds that come into our mind from far out places. And we take those sounds and we put them to rest. And our lives are permeated by hope and potential that frees us from all the stereotypes that we've heard. And we're sitting in this place and enjoying it, and enjoying the fact that the years ahead will have many of the vicissitudes of aging. They're unavoidable. But through it all, the spirit of regeneration, the spirit of hope, the spirit of being alive, no matter where our journey takes us, will be with us always until we take our last breath. So now we turn around to come back into our contemporary moment. And the wall of doubt is no longer there. We don't have to go through it, around it, touch it. It's gone. And we're alive. And we're happy and joyful and filled with hope and optimism. So the first thing I would like to talk about as being important in this process of living by ourselves is that we reach out to people in our lives who we may have been close to and we've lost connections with, or even people in our lives for whom we've had difficulty, and seek to make healing with those people, reconnect, find common ground. It won't always work, but it's really important as we're looking ahead to living by ourselves, that we make these relationships as deep and meaningful as we possibly can, understanding that there are some that are not necessarily redeemable. And we need to, in this process, take responsibility for wherever our part has been in the breaking of relationships. So if there was such a thing as Elder Scouts, we might reframe the Girl Scouts song that says, make new friends and keep the old. One is silver, the other is gold. And reframe it as, make new friends and repair the old. One is silver and the other is gold. Make new friends and repair the old. One is silver and the other is gold. So if we look at our lives in terms of an hourglass, in which the sand at the top is getting much less and seemingly going down much faster, and the sand at the bottom seems to be fuller, we see that our mortality is more imminent. We never know. So on the deepest level, in this process of eldering, we're preparing to make our lives more wholesome, make our lives more filled with meaning, more filled with joy, more filled with hope, more filled with blessing, more filled with resilience, because resilience is going to be our greatest ally as we deal with the vicissitudes of aging. And so, what we need to do is we need to work on our inner life in the process of eldering. And at the same time we're working on our inner lives, we need to be able to bring this into the world so that the membrane between our inner life and our outer life becomes more and more seamless. And so I'd like to talk about 3 major practices to develop our inner lives and to make our outer lives more seamless. So the first has to do with taking time each day to connect to spirit. because ultimately, when you get to the essence of the essence of the essence, our life is a spiritual journey. And so what we want to be able to do on the spiritual journey is to in whatever way works for us, to take time each day, 20 minutes, a half hour, an hour, 2 hours, probably never less than 20 minutes. We can do it by praying, by meditating, by singing, by dancing, by doing laughing yoga, to to let the spirit of love, the spirit of life, the spirit of the life force enter into our being. And so, and I'm sure that each of us are probably doing it now in our own way. And the second is that each day we take time for self-reflection. And to really look at ourselves to see, hey, how could I have done this better today? Is there any place where I may have been inappropriate with someone? Can I clean it up? Can I change my behavior? But each day, because what it's all about is learning and growing. And Miles Davis said, I'll play it first and tell you what I played later. And John Dewey said, learning is the reconstruction of experience. And so in this process of living alone or in community, wherever we are, it's important that we look at what we've done, look at the music we made the day before and be able to play it back to ourselves. Look at our life experience, what we've experienced in how we've been the day before, and learn from it. Because learning is the absolute key to healthy aging. And the third of these practices is that in every encounter, to train ourselves to be in the sweet spot of goodness, advocating for, facilitating, smoothing over the best possible outcome. So if I were to be asked, what is the best way to reflect, to connect to spirit? What's the best way to do it? I would say, your way. Or as Frank Sinatra sang, I did it my way, your way. For each of us, the road to spirit is different, and that's really beautiful. And so so I'd like to talk a little about self-reflection. So there are many ways to do self-reflection. I like to think about being present. As I was talking to my friend Gesher about being present, he said, the first thing we have to do is understand that we are mortal, that our days are numbered. And so how have we been in terms of being present, being in the moment? How have we been in terms of finding ways to serve? It may be with just a phone call to someone who's ill, or it may be going out and participating in one way or another in acts of service. The opportunities to serve are all around us. Another thing we might look at is how we engage our struggle. We are in a struggle right now. All of humanity is in a struggle. All of humanity is in a struggle to be able to survive, the changes in the climate, the changes in in all the aspects of our lives. You know, we are engaged in a struggle to bring repair to our lives and the world. And so engaging in the struggle is really, really key. Another thing we might look at is our inner beast. Each of us has an inner beast within us. How are we pacifying our inner beast? Are we aware of it? Are we developing more and more self-awareness? Are we looking at how it comes out? Are we understanding that there's a boomerang effect, that every time our inner beast, which is fed by a lifetime of the slings and arrows of the outrageous fortune that each of us has gone through, to understand that each time our inner beast manifests, that there's a boomerang that comes back at the end with equal or greater velocity. So, are we loving one another? Are we showing love to other people all the time? Are we doing it through acts of kindness? Are we cultivating our power to really be able to be ourselves in our own lives? You know, we think of our power as, you know, as the strength, but our power really comes from gentleness. And this is one of the lessons of aging. Are we jettisoning excess baggage? Are we getting rid of old anger, old hurts, old feelings? Are we seeking to repair broken relationships? Are we holding on to one another? Are we holding one another together so that our relationships become more meaningful? Are we working consciously on growing? Are we grounding what we do in a vision of who we are becoming? So these are all kinds of things that are really important in terms of this process of self-reflection. So why do we do this inner work? Why do we do it? We do it to bring our lives into harmony and to transform our relationships. So then, how do we transform our relationships? And that's to develop the practice of putting to rest the voice that says, no, this won't work, or you can't do it, or anything else that brings a judgment to a situation, except how can I make this situation I'm in with another person sweeter, more meaningful, more deeper, more easy? And so this practice, it can go on in the supermarket as we're online on the checkout line, and we look around and we see somebody, and we know that they really need something good, a kind word or a kind act. And so our work is to practice being at the sweet spot of goodness in every moment. And believe me, none of us are there. None of us are there. So let's talk a moment about how to be closer to that mark. I was once, this is an apocryphal story. Apocryphal means that we can end the screen share and let's go on looking at everybody, so that'd be cool. So this is an apocryphal story. Apocryphal means that it may be true, it may not be true, but to me it's reflective of something that's really important. So, you know, I'm a New Yorker. I haven't been to New York in many years, and it seems like particularly around Lincoln Square, it's always in the process of changing. And one time I was in New York City and I was trying to get to meet a friend at Carnegie Hall, and I saw a vegetarian hot dog vendor. And you know those hot dog vendors they have on the streets of New York? I used to like to eat the meat hot dogs. Haven't done that in many, many years. I saw a vegetarian hot dog vendor and I went up to him and I said, "Can you tell me how to get to Carnegie Hall?" And he looked at me seriously and he said, "Practice, practice, practice." So that's like absolute key in this journey of eldering is practice, practice, practice. So I looked at him and I wanted to show him how I was also hip, and I said to him, "Make me one with everything." And so he made me a hot dog with everything on it, a vegetarian hot dog with mustard and sauerkraut and onions and everything on it. And then I handed him a $5 bill for a $2.50 hot dog. And I stood there waiting for change. And finally I said to him, "Excuse me, my friend, I'm waiting for change." And he said, "Change comes from within. Change comes from within." You know, this story is illustrated in many ways. For many years, my wife Debbie and I, we had the privilege of stewarding an elder home, a home for a nursing home and assisted living home, and one time there was there was a nurse there that she was actually an older African American woman, Mrs. Delane, and I noticed that every day she would wheel a woman, Mrs. Pat, to her nursing station as she did her documentation. And one day I said to her, "Mrs. Delane, how come you wheel Mrs. Pat to be next to you every day?" And she said, "I don't know, Barry. It just makes me feel good to be right next to her, to be around her." And then Mrs. Pat died. And as we did for every resident, oh, by the way, Mrs. Pat couldn't communicate. Mrs. Pat was not communicative. This is key to the story, you know. And so Mrs. Pat died, and as we did for everybody in our home who died, we had a memorial service, and we invited, of course, staff and residents and family members, and family members reached out to friends, and sometimes it was the only memorial service anybody ever had in their family because they were old and their family members were old. And at Mrs. Pat's memorial service, there was a younger woman there who had a big photograph of Mrs. Pat sitting on Point Mendocino doing yoga in the 30s, in the 1930s. And so, you know, what became real clear from this is that you know, as we prepare ourselves, even as we lose certain kinds of cognitive ability or communicative ability, our essence is still there, and we're preparing our essence. We're preparing our essence. This is so important. That's why we're talking about practice, practice, practice. Because for young elders, it's important that we practice. For older elders, it's even more important. So that as the vicissitudes of life, and aging is not easy. Aging is not easy. The aches, the pains, the losses, as we deal with the vicissitudes of life, the practice of connecting to spirit, the practice of self-reflection, the practice of being in that sweet spot of change, being present with kindness and love. This is the practice that will serve us no matter what happens as we go through all the changes that our lives bring ahead of us. Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome questions and comments now.
Thank you, Barry. I just want to invite everyone here, if you have a comment or a question for our wonderful keynote to use the hand raising option at the bottom of your screen. You'll click on reactions, you'll see an option to raise your hand, and then we'll know that you want to be in the queue to speak. And of course, if you'd like to place your comment in the chat, and feel free to do that as well. Kathy, please.
Thank you, Nadia. So Barry, I just really relished your emphasis on our inner life, because in my work, I find it's something that people aren't as familiar with, or why we do that work. And I took a lot of notes from your PowerPoint because I think it will help me in working with adults. And I also loved your part about practice, 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 because I think what I try to share with people is start small, and
Yes.
and then look at what you get from it and sort of acknowledge that, because once you start seeing the benefit of effort, I think it keeps you going. So thank you for your insight.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I want to bless you with great success in your own inner journey, first of all, and in communicating that to the people you work with.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I see Judith Kate would like to say something.
Hey, my old friend Judith Kate, how are you, dear heart?
I'm well, thank you so much. I am very thrilled to hear everything that you just said and to just see you again in your radiance. And what a champion you have been for so many years. And I am crossing this threshold at 63 into the zone of the elders where I have been working as an ally for so long. It is a fascinating and sometimes tumultuous and full of gifts space, very liminal to be in this in between. I hope to live many more years, but so much.
Bless you with many years, my sister, and talk about radiance. You sure do radiate a lot of love and light. Thank you so much.
Yeah, the whole inner work thing is the whole reason I'm here at this conference with the workshop that's coming up. So I'm going to pop off now, but I wanted to give you a bunch of love.
Thank you, Judith Kate. And I see Diane Cohen.
Hi, Diane.
Hi, thank you so much for this inspiring talk. I would love to know more about these communities that you've created, because I am looking for a community to move into that would be the just right place for me. I'm now in the Boston area and I'm 73.
So the communities we've created mostly have been in elder care homes. And it's a concept that we call a regenerative community. And it starts by making sure that there's a community meeting every day and that the staff is trained to weave together community among the people and to foster empowerment, meaning, learning, growth, and joy among all the people in the home. And if you're thinking now about a retirement home, a friend of mine just moved into a place in Sonoma County called ENSO, ENSO, which is a joint venture of the Zen Hospice of San Francisco and a company that I forget the name of right now that has managed elder communities all around the country. It's pricey. It's hard if you're poor to age.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. And we have Elka.
Hi, thank you so much for bringing so much light and holiness to this topic. Your idea that the impulse to isolate that we can shake that off through spiritual practice is really is like totally resonating in me. And for myself, but I work with people as a hospital chaplain, with people who would not acknowledge that through isolating, they're actually causing pain and harm to themselves. And so it seems like there's some sort of step, to work with them around that blind spot before even encouraging them to shake off that impulse. And I guess that's where I'm trying to find, what I'm groping for is like how to support them when they have a blind spot around their own self-isolation and the harm that it's causing them. I wonder if you could help me in my groping there.
Well, first of all, I would imagine that as a hospital chaplain, that most of the people you're dealing with are very short-term relationships.
Often, yeah, I only see them like maybe 1 to 3 times.
Yes, yes. I don't know. I think you need to, I think the way, maybe to do the best you can possibly do in terms of bonding with them. And then to point out to them the benefits of bonding. Play it first and tell them what you played later.
I love that. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Elka. So I see 3 more people. We have 5 minutes left, but I just want to say here that in the chat, Amitai has posted Barry, my most loved friend, Barry, the sweet spot of goodness has always been the way of walking through life that you've modeled to all of us. It's a wonderful and critical reminder.
Thank
And
you.
now Mary Rita.
Well, I just want to just build on that. Thank you for the sweet spot of goodness. Thank you for practice, practice, practice. As I was listening to you, I realized that I was gifted with a mother who practiced being in touch with the spirit. And she also then knew how to make connections. And I often said that, like, I learned how to pray in the womb from her. And I realized I've learned how to practice from her also. And at one point, I was a sister, a religious, and we certainly practice. So I'm leaving here realizing that one of my best gifts that I can teach those that I work with is practice, and the sweet spot of life. So thank you so much.
The nun study. Are you familiar with the nun study?
Mm-hmm.
In which, for everybody else, in which they studied the brains of nuns after they passed, and they found that that for many of them, even though they were functional and able to participate in community and all that, and have relationships, that their brains were fully tangled as a person who might be identified with Alzheimer's. And it was practice that even got past the tangled brains. Thank you so much, my sister. Bless you. Be well and be happy.
And Steve Claper. And then we're going to end with Rev Victor.
Hi, Steve.
Hello, Barry. What a delight to see you again. We just met at Ohala. I can't believe it took me all these years to finally meet you.
Really, I love you, Steve. I love you, man.
You said there's just 2 very fast anecdotes I wanted to tell you. You said practice. Pablo Casals, when he was 95 years old, in an interview, told the interviewer that he still practiced about 2 or 3 hours a day. The man said, "You're the greatest cello player that ever lived. You're 95 years old. Why do you practice 2 or 3 hours a day?" He said, "I'm beginning to see some improvement." And and the other thing is my Baba, my grandmother, when she was also 95 years old, she said that all her life she would offer prayers. She would pray to God before she went to sleep. She said, "My prayers have become very simple. I only ask for one thing. Every night I ask God to give me one more day." That's all.
Well, I bless you with many more days, many sweet days. Many productive days.
You too, my brother. Thank you.
And Victor, our final comment or question.
The first time Nadja and I met you back in 1997, we were told before we went to your house that we had to get a blessing from you. So I learned how to do blessings from you. But if you don't mind, I want to give you a name because you're the master of blessing. You are truly the poet of From Aging to Saging. And I was struck because there are no coincidences that you said in 1975, you wrote the Elder Creed with Debbie.
Actually,
it
was with Bob Burke that I wrote that.
Oh, Bob Burke, right. So in 1975, I started my doctorate at Berkeley, and I encountered an odd name, Jack London, a professor of gerontology in the School of Education, who was trying to undo the geriatric model through academic research. What I discovered about you and your opportunities of speaking to gerontology gatherings at universities is that what was missing from others that you brought to it was what we define as wisdom, which is knowledge plus experience and a poetic soul. So I want to thank you and ask you, do you see significant change in the old geriatric model that existed in the 70s to today?
Well, first of all, I just want to say it's knowledge, wisdom, poetic soul, and connection to the future. It's connection to the future. The future needs to guide us in this process. And yeah, my friend Claudia, who was the medical director at the Live Oak Living Center, who went on to become the head of geriatrics and palliative care at the Alameda County Medical Center, and now teaches medicine. And she always says to her students, you are as important as your as important an instrument as your stethoscope. And there are more and more people who are enlightened, engaged in the field of elder care. The biggest problem is that the system itself impedes learning and growth. You know, whether we're talking about insurance companies or whether we're talking about the great bureaucracy of Medicare and Medicaid, these are not friends of learning. These are not friends of growing. These are not friends of innovation. And this is why some of us are working on the Live Oak project to reimagine, redesign, and transform the whole system of elder care from top to bottom and inside out, elder care and services to people with disabilities, living with disabilities, many of whom are elders, in fact. So yeah, the growth is happening in between the cracks. You know, the grass between the cracks hasn't not yet broken up the concrete.
Thank you, Barry. Thank you so very much for giving us this time this morning, for your inspiration, for the goodness, and just the way that you started us into this day with your incredible goodness and kindness and wisdom. That poetic soul that Victor mentioned.
Thank you so
And
much.
now